Welcome back, everyone. It's Eric from Eric Candy here. Today we are back with yet again another Cosmic Eclipse deck profile. This time we're going to be taking a look at the new Arceus Dialga Palkia GX, another one of the more hyped new dragon tag teams that are coming out of this set. We're going to be pairing this with Keldeo GX. I think that's been one of the main partners a lot of people have kind of been looking towards. So that's what we're going to be experimenting with here. And this is the same list that was featured in our recent testing rounds video. So if you guys do want to see how this deck looks in action, I will also have a link down below in the description for you to check that out. And also too, if you guys might be unfamiliar with some of those testing rounds videos they usually feature some of our early, more unrefined lists that we used to start testing with. So that means there might be a few things in here we can potentially tweak or improve. Just something to kind of keep in mind as we do go through this deck profile. But let's get into it though. We have 4 copies of Jirachi up first. This is going to be one of our main consistency boosting Pokemon here. So we're playing Jirachi, of course, for that Stellar Wish ability. I get to look at the top 5 cards of our deck, pick a trainer card we find there, put it into our hand. So we are a somewhat combo-oriented deck, especially if we go second. This deck does tend to become very combo reliant in order to get a first turn attack off. But Jirachi, you guys know this card by now. It's just one of the best consistency boosters we have in the game. Next up from there, though, we have 2 copies of the new Arceus Dialga Palkia GX. Like I said, one of, I think, 2 very powerful new dragon tag teams we're getting in Cosmic Eclipse. But it's a basic Pokemon, 280 HP, has 2 different attacks. The first of which, Ultimate Ray, is going to be a Water Metal Colorless, does 150, and then you search your deck for 3 basic energies and attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you like. So it's kind of like Full Blitz, kind of on steroids, because you can attach to anything, which is pretty interesting. So this attack is definitely solid, but I think the GX attack is really what makes this card so good. So for a Metal Energy, your attacks do 30 more damage to your opponent's Pokemon the rest of the game, but if you have a Water Energy attached as well, your Pokemon take 1 more prize card when you knock out stuff throughout the rest of the game as well. So this is a pretty insane buff. All of your Pokemon do 30 more damage and take additional prizes whenever they take knockouts. So that means your opponent's tag teams are going to be giving up 4 prizes, their Dedenes 3 prizes, etc., etc. This is an insane effect, and we've seen a lot of cards with an effect like this, usually in the form of an ability, do well in the past. Like we've had the Lugia EX from Plasma Storm. We had the Rayquaza Deoxys Legend, even prior to that. So this type of effect is definitely good, and the fact that it applies to all of our Pokemon, really, really insane stuff. And then Ultimate Ray, like I said, just a nice attack to kind of set up our board for the rest of the game. So from there, next up we have 1 copy of Rayquaza GX. Rayquaza GX, this is mainly just a card if you're going second, just because you essentially basically only want to give your opponent 1 turn before you use this GX attack. So if you're going first, as an example, you can just attach a Metal Energy and pass, and then on your next turn you can use your GX attack. What is it called? Altered Creation GX. So that's fine. But if you're going second, you really, I think, can't afford to waste a turn with this deck, just because your first attack isn't even going to do damage of the game. So Rayquaza has that Stormy Winds ability. You get to discard the top 3 cards of your deck and then put a basic energy from your discard attached to Rayquaza. So what we can do is, if we're going second, we can get down maybe a Metal Energy on our Arceus Dialga Palkia GX, use Rayquaza GX to get a Water Energy from discard onto it, and then energy switch it to the Arceus Dialga Palkia to still get off an Altered Creation GX on the first turn of the game. So I think Rayquaza is a vitally important card for a deck like this. As long as you're playing Energy Switch in here, I think you have to play Rayquaza. Or I think if you're not playing Rayquaza, you have to play Ends Resolve. Or I think you need some sort of combination. But Rayquaza is going to be the way we're going to go with in this particular list to ensure the first turn attack with Altered Creation GX. So up next from there, we have 3 copies of Keldeo GX. This is pretty much kind of like our main attacker, actually, in the deck. So Keldeo, of course, is very strong because it has that Pure Heart ability. It's going to prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to it by your opponent's Pokemon, GX and EX. So we're going to wall against a ton of powerful things in the format. We're going to block against things like Reshiram Zekrom GX, Reshiram Charizard, Pikachu Zekrom, Gardevoir Sylveon, etc., etc. The list goes on. Keldeo GX has a fantastic ability right now. Now, its attacks are a little bit clunky to get up and running sometimes. That's why we are playing the Arceus Dialga Palkia. But both of its attacks cost 2 Water and a Colorless, and we're really only looking at the first one just because we are going to burn our GX attack on our Arceus Dialga Palkia. But the first attack is 110 for 2 Water and a Colorless, and it goes through any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So even goes through opposing Keldeos as an example. So basically this attack is going to do 140 the rest of the game. It's going to two-shot really everything in format. You're going to one-shot one prize Pokemon like Giratina, which is fantastic thanks to the Arceus Dialga Palkia getting additional prizes. So your Keldeos are immune to GXs. They do extra damage and they take multiple prizes whenever they get knocked out or whenever they take knockouts. So it turns your Keldeos into just an amazing attacker, I think. So that's going to be really what the whole deck's going to be based around. No other attackers. I do think there are considerations for some other cards. I think the Megalopony Jigglypuff is something you could maybe try out. Maybe even the new Blastoise Piplup. But for right now, I'm kind of going with a streamlined like suite of attackers here. Just going kind of all in on the Keldeos. And then from there, we have 2 copies of the Dedenne GX to round out our list here. Of course, just for that Dedenne changeability, dump our hand, draw 6. Like I said, especially if we are going second, we're going to need some ways to dig and ensure that we can get the turn 1 Altered Creation GX up and running. So going on from there, guys, we have a ton of training cards to get to. We have 4 copies of Lily, and we also have 4 copies of Cynthia. These are going to be our primary forms of draw supporter. So of course Lily, draw until we have 6, or draw until we have 8 if it's the first turn of the game, and Cynthia just a nice shuffle and draw 6. But we also have 1 copy of Giovanni's Exile in this list. This is something I'm trying out right now. We are also playing Super Scoop Ups, which I'll get to in a little bit. But one thing I think is very important with this is to be able to deny knockouts. So especially now that we have Great Catcher in format, I think Keldeo is a little bit more easily played around than it would have been in the pre-Cosmic Eclipse era. So the reason for Giovanni's Exile, it says you discard up to 2 bench Pokemon, all cards attached to them from your bench that have no damage counters on them. So this is going to be important at getting rid of those Dedennes that are sitting on our bench, those Rayquazas that are sitting on our bench, just because we don't want to give our opponent Great Catcher targets if possible, or maybe even getting rid of Jirachis in the late game as well. So this is going to be one of the ways we have to deny knockouts, and I think that's going to be an important thing with this deck because Keldeo is very good on its own. It's really your additional Pokemon that are going to be your liabilities, not your Keldeos. So that's why I'm going for the one Giovanni's Exile right now. This could become an additional copy of Super Scoop Up. I'm not sure yet. Like I said at the beginning of this video, this list is kind of in flux, and there's some things I'm still playing around with. But I definitely like the ability to deny knockouts with this thing. So up next from there, we have 2 copies of Viridian Forest. This is one of the stadium cards we're playing. So we discard a card from our hand and search your deck for a basic energy. So not only is this good because we play multiple types of energies, but also we can discard energy to get out with Rayquaza GX, which is something important, like I said, if we are going second in particular here. So next up from there, we have 2 copies of the new Stadium Chaotic Swell. This is an immensely important card in the deck. Very good for any deck that is playing Keldeo GX. So it doesn't really do too much on its own, but basically whenever your opponent puts down a stadium, or any player I guess for that matter, puts down a stadium card to replace it, that stadium is also discarded. So Power Plant is one of the big cards that really gives Keldeo GX a lot of headache, just because they can shut off that powerful Pure Heart ability with Power Plant, and then they can knock out Keldeo. So that's one of the big issues Keldeo I think has always faced. Most recently. So Chaotic Swell is just a card that really helps that a lot. And this is actually a card I wouldn't mind even going up to a 3rd copy of potentially, just because a lot of the decks that play Power Plant are like greens decks, and they typically play close to like 4 copies. So I think there is consideration for a 3rd one of these. You probably would never need more than that, but just a very, very important card, I think, in any deck that is going to play Keldeo GX going forward. Going on from there, we have 4 copies of Energy Switch. So you move a basic energy from one of your Pokemon to another. Pretty self-explanatory. It's going to be, like I said, extremely important if we are going second in particular, because that is going to allow us to get down the Rayquaza GX with an energy switch to our Arceus Dialga Palkia to get off an Altered Creation GX on the first turn. But even beyond that, it's still good in the late stages of the game because we can, if one of our attackers gets damaged, we can move the energy to something fresh and keep on attacking. So we have a lot of flexibility with where our energy goes in this deck, which is kind of nice, thanks to the attack on Arceus Dialga Palkia, thanks to Energy Switch as well. Next up from there, we have 4 copies of Cherish Ball. Pretty self-explanatory. Everything in this deck is a GX other than the Jirachis, and we really don't need much. I think to search out Jirachis, communication's pretty bad in this deck, just because we don't play that many actual Pokemon. So I think actually just going all in on Cherish Ball is fine here, just because we can grab everything in the deck outside of our little Jirachis there. Nevertheless, though, we do have 2 copies of Mysterious Treasure as well. So this is going to allow us to discard a card from our hand and get a Psychic or Dragon Pokemon. So, of course, we can grab the Arceus Dialga Palkia or Rayquaza GX. These are going to be the Pokemon we need the most on the first turn of the game. So for that reason, we're going to play something like Mysterious Treasure just to ensure that we can find these, especially because we play pretty low counts of Arceus Dialga Palkia. We really only need 1 throughout the course of a game. So Mysterious Treasure just helps give us more outs to finding that. Also, of course, gives us flexibility as to finding Rayquaza, as opposed to just running more physical copies of the Arceus Dialga Palkia. Up next from there, we have 2 copies of a Skateboard. So Skateboard, of course, is going to be primary for our Jirachi. It's going to allow us to retreat for 1 less, and we can even retreat through our status conditions. So like I said, mainly for Jirachi, but sometimes it still can be helpful on other Pokemon. Up next from there, we have 3 copies of Switch. So Switch is going to be really handy. A lot of our attackers have awkward retreat cost. Rayquaza has, I believe it's a 2 retreat cost, or it might be a 3, I forget. 3 retreat cost, so yeah, he's pretty bulky. Same thing for Arceus Dialga Palkia, 3 retreat cost. Keldeo GX has a 2 retreat cost. Switch is just going to be very good at allowing us to have a little bit more flexibility and mobility on our board. Next up from there, we have 1 copy of Reset Stamp as well. So Reset Stamp is actually, I think, a card I would consider maybe even going up to 2 of. I'm not sure just yet, but I definitely like 1 at the very least. So your opponent shuffles their hand into their deck, draws equal to the amount of prizes they have. So we're actually going to typically, I think, go behind in prizes with this deck, because turn 1, or on our first attack of the game, we are just going to use Alter Creation, not doing any damage, not putting on any pressure. Turn 2, we're going to attack with its first attack, Ultimate Ray. 150 or 180, I guess, after the GX attack is factored in. Doesn't really knock out any of the big GXs right now, so you're usually not taking prizes with Arceus Dialga Palkia initially. And then from there, it usually is going to go down. And so from there, you're going to be, your opponent's going to be essentially 3 prizes for the rest of the game once you are starting to attack. So Reset Stamp is going to be a way you can come back from some of those early prizes being taken off your tag team. But yeah, and for that reason too, I think there is consideration for a second copy, but I think 1 is really, really good for the moment though. Next up from there, we have 3 copies of Super Scoop Up. This is kind of a card I already alluded to. So you flip a coin, if heads, put a Pokemon, all cards attached to it, back into your hand. So this is one way we can deny knockout. So you can pick up those Dedennes, those Rayquazas. Particularly in the case of Rayquaza or Dedenne, if you're unfortunate enough to start with them, you can actually pick them up and potentially reuse them. You can reuse Jirachis. I've even done plays where I Super Scoop Up a Jirachi, switch the new active Pokemon back into the Jirachi to Star Wish again. So there's just a lot of cool plays you can do with this. And of course, if your opponent does swing on your tag team or your Keldeo, you can energy switch some energy off of it and Super Scoop Up to get that Pokemon out of harm's way and deny some knockouts. So like I said, I think denying KOs with this deck is going to be very, very important, especially with those non-Keldeo Pokemon that are kind of bench-sitting liabilities now that we have not custom catcher, but great catcher in the format. So like I said, I think you maybe even could experiment with turning the Giovanni into a 4th Scoop Up. I think that's valid as well. Giovanni is, kind of more of a guaranteed effect, whereas Super Scoop Up is not. That's why I'm going for the 1 copy right now, but feel free to experiment with that, guys. I do think you could also try out Great Potion. That is another card I'm kind of looking at right now. Since it feels kind of a similar role, but right now I like being able to pick up our bench Pokemon. Then from there, we have 3 copies of the new Great Catcher. So this is a card that is going to be in pretty much most people's lists going forward after Cosmic Eclipse. Very, very strong new item. You discard 2 cards from your hand and switch your opponent's active with one of their bench Pokemon GX or EX. So we're largely going to be 2-shotting Pokemon. Great Catcher is just going to be really good at allowing us to clean up those 2-hit knockouts. There's even other things too, like whenever we go for Alter Creation GX, you can potentially Great Catcher something on the bench to strand it while you burn your GX attack and try to, buy yourself a turn from being swung on while your Arceus Dialga Palkia is just sitting there idly. So Great Catcher is a really fantastic card in the new format. So going ahead, taking a look at our energies, we have 7 copies of Water Energy in total in this deck. And then for Metal Energies, we have 6. So we're leaning a little bit more heavily on water energies, just of course because Keldeo takes 2 water to attack. I think there's consideration to maybe even dropping a metal in favor of an additional water energy, or maybe just cutting a metal entirely. But I tried to go for a somewhat even split here, just because we do need water and metal for the GX attack on Arceus Dialga Palkia. So I wanted to make sure we had relatively even odds of finding each of them. So yeah, guys, that is going to be our list here for the new Arceus Dialga Palkia GX deck. Overall, it's been a pretty interesting deck so far. Being able to turn your Keldeo into a Pokemon that 2-shots things as opposed to 3-shot things and gains additional prizes when they take knockouts is something I think really, really good in this format, especially now that we have Chaotic Swell in the mix. I don't think this deck would be nearly as viable if it did not have this card. But I hope you guys did enjoy this look at this deck, and of course some of the additional feedback I kind of outlined here going forward if you want to experiment with some of those changes as well. But stay tuned to the channel, guys. We have a ton of Cosmic Eclipse coverage coming up over the next several weeks. But if you did enjoy this content, feel free to like and subscribe, and consider supporting this channel by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/rarecandytcg, or by picking up some merch from our online store, rarecandytcg.com. It would mean a lot. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.